Now let's go to text number 5. It's found in Luke 24 and verse 1. Luke chapter 24 and verse 1. And I'm going to go a little earlier. I'm going to go to chapter 23, beginning with verse 53, so that we can catch the context. And what I want you to see here is the sequence of days. There are 3 days here: Friday, Sabbath, and Sunday, or the 6th day, the 7th day, and the 1st day. Let's notice the sequence, beginning at verse 53 of chapter 23. Then he, that is Joseph of Arimathea, took his body down, wrapped it in linen, and laid it in a tomb that was hewn out of rock. There was no one who had ever lain before in that tomb. Now notice what day that was when Joseph of Arimathea asked for the body of Jesus. That day was the preparation. And the reason it's called the preparation is because in Exodus 16, God said, what you're going to prepare it today. That's probably where the word preparation comes from. But anyway, it says that day, Friday, was the preparation, and the Sabbath drew near. So what was the next day going to be? The next day was going to be the Sabbath. Continue saying in verse 55, and the women who had come with him from Galilee followed after, and they observed the tomb and how his body was laid. Then they returned and prepared spices and fragrant oils, and they rested on Sunday according to the commandment. That's not what it says. It says they rested when? They rested the Sabbath according to the commandment. Let me ask you, was the commandment still binding after the death of Christ? This is the 4th commandment. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. The women are keeping the Sabbath. So if Jesus had intended them to keep the first day of the week and had taught his disciples to do that, why are the women keeping the Sabbath? Furthermore, you know what's interesting? Is that the Gospel of Luke is being written about 30 years after the resurrection of Christ. And even though this is being written about 30 years after the resurrection of Christ, Luke still tells us that the women kept the Holy Sabbath. And so it continues saying there, once again, verse 55, and the women who had come with him from Galilee followed after, and they observed the tomb and how his body was laid. Then they returned and prepared spices and fragrant oils, and they rested on the Sabbath according to the commandment. Now, how many days do we have so far? We have the preparation, which is Friday, when Joseph asked for the body of Jesus. Then they rested the Sabbath day according to the commandment. And now notice chapter 24 and verse 1. This is the text number 5 that mentions the first day of the week. Now, on the first day of the week, very early in the morning, they and certain other women with them came to the tomb, bringing the spices which they had prepared, but they found the stone rolled away from the tomb. So, do you notice the sequence of days that we have in this passage? What day did Jesus die? He died on Friday. Which day did Jesus rest in the tomb and the women rest outside the tomb? On the Sabbath, according to the commandment. And which day did Jesus resurrect? He resurrected on the first day of the week. So let me ask you something. Is Sunday the Sabbath? Sunday is the day after the Sabbath, according to this passage. Sunday is not the Sabbath. So to say that the Christian day of worship is, the Christian Sabbath is Sunday, is a contradiction, because Sunday cannot be the Sabbath. The Sabbath is the 7th day, and Sunday is the first day of the week, according to this sequence. Now let's ask the 3 questions of this text number 5. Is there anything in this text that says that the first day of the week is holy? Absolutely nothing. Is there anything in the text to suggest that people should go to church on the first day of the week? Absolutely not. Is there anything in the text that would suggest that we are supposed to honor the resurrection of Jesus Christ by the observance of the first day of the week? Absolutely nothing. The text simply makes a statement of fact. It says, now on the first day of the week, very early in the morning, they and certain other women with them came to the tomb, bringing the spices which they had prepared. And then verse 2, but they found the stone rolled away from the tomb. That's all it says. Now, by the way, Luke is known as a very meticulous historian. Luke, besides being a physician, he was a historian. He says at the beginning of his book that he investigated carefully all of the sources. And it's interesting that he says in Luke chapter 1 and verses 1 to 3, he says, it seemed good to me also, having had perfect understanding of all things from the very first, to write to you an orderly account. Now, if Sunday was the day of worship, how did that escape his attention? Being a careful historian. It just doesn't jive. It doesn't make any sense to say that Luke would have forgotten, writing 30 years later, investigating the sources, and if Sunday was the day of worship, that he would not even mention that Sunday was the day of worship. Particularly when it says that Luke, it seemed good to Luke, that having had a perfect understanding of all things from the first, that he write an orderly account concerning what Jesus had done.